All right, so we're part of the way through this project. You can see that the 4066 has no roof or lights at the moment. The roof is actually down here on the ground. It's actually fairly easy to take off. The reason we did that is because we're running some new wires up to some brackets. So I made brackets to go right here to put the new floodlights on. And so those are where the floodlights will go, is on those brackets. I've just got them up there right now. I just got done bending them. And now next I've got to still drill the hole for the light itself, and then I'll prime it and get it all cleaned up, prime it, and then I'll just just paint it black. I think they look pretty good for just kind of quick work. Down in the cab, what we're doing is right now we're testing out all the systems with the power. We've opted to use the accessory port we're going to have a relay that comes from the key switch. So that means whenever the key's on, the monitor and the cameras will be on. We almost, I think we're going to tie the backup camera actually into the backup beeper. I have silenced the beeper, but the wiring harness is still there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and with the beeper, we're going to tie that in to the beeper, so whenever it's in reverse, it will backup camera will switch from front view to rear view. And I think hopefully I can get the software and the monitor to work correctly. But I think it's coming along really nicely. In the end, over on the far side, I'll walk around the back of the tractor here. Over on the far side of the tractor, this is where most of our switches will be. We're actually going to mount, I forgot to mention the fuse block. We're actually going to mount the fuse block behind the seat. That's about the best place to put it. There's not a whole lot of places to put it. I thought I was going to be able to fit it under here or something like that, but it just does not fit. So you can kind of see some of the wiring that's in under the console. I'll be really glad when all this gets done, because then I can just clean up all this mess right here. Here's that wiring harness I was telling you about. I think I already showed it to you, but there's that wiring harness I was telling you about. Oop, almost ran into that. But only other thing we did over here is we had to pull out, oh, they're no longer up here. Oh, there they are on the ground. See those things on the ground right there, the little plugs? We had to pull those out in order to put these screws in. These are just 13 millimeter cap bolts. Those are pretty much ubiquitous to John Deere stuff. So everything's coming along good. We picked up a couple 100 feet of 14, I think those are that's 14 gauge wire. We also picked up 50 feet of 10 gauge to run the linear actuator. So this project's coming right along. Because there's friend and I are working on it. You know, the updates are kind of slow on this, so I'm kind of doing it major steps when we stop for, you know, break or something like that. So probably not as informative as I would hope it to be, or as probably you would like it to be, but I'm trying to tell you what I'm doing as I'm going along. So anyway, I'll come back. Hopefully we can get the roof back on. I will step up on the box blade and at least show you the roof. See if I can actually get up here without falling. At least that's the plan. So that's what the roof looks like, if anybody ever wondered. Actually quite a bit of electrical stuff up there, pretty easy to get off, but you can more or less run the power. I'll have some other comments when it comes down to running the wires and everything else, but that's what a roof looks like with the top off. Alright, so the lights and the linear actuator are done. I unfortunately did not get a lot of video. Turns out both of these projects were actually much more involved than I intended. Two of us spent approximately 45 man hours doing this. So if you want to think about that, even if we got paid You know, a dealership getting $100 an hour, I mean, that's over $4,000 just in labor to do this. So anyway, what we did, as you can see, the linear actuator is in. I will demonstrate that here shortly in this video. Works fantastic. Had some electrical engineering issues with that in terms of relays. The lights are in. Ended up, because they are designed to be mounted, they're designed to be mounted up and down. So what I did is I fabricated this bracket. I think I told you in a previous video, or in the earlier part of this video, we were going to fabricate brackets. Fabricated some brackets, put some Blitz Black on there, and I think they look just about as good as factory as you can get. Keep in mind, I think all total modifications to the actual tractor were very minimal, very, very minimal. If anything, we cleaned up some of John Deere's wiring from adding the lights and everything else. What we did to put the lights on there is we actually pulled off the top of the cab. I can't remember if I got a video of that. Like I said, we were just in a rush to get it done before my friend had to leave. And so, but we got it all done. He was very, very helpful in some of this because he has some experience in doing the relays. But we end up pulling the cab roof off. The lights we actually used, there's some wires that are there for the European harness, I guess. That's what we traced in the technical manual. And so we ended up using those coupled with, we actually added an extra fuse block to the tractor, and I'll show you that here in just a little bit. We ended up putting it behind the seat. Come to find out, there's not a whole lot of room anywhere else. We basically tore apart the entire cab. And we mounted the fuse blocks behind the seat, and then everything else we mounted on this console right here. So here's the switch for the new lights, and here's the switch for the linear actuator. We did not get to the video camera project. We actually did design it. We have it laid out. We just opted to get these two projects done before giving up for the weekend. So I'll get the video cameras done here in the next month or so. I'll get them installed and everything. What we're actually going to do is we're actually going to mount it up inside the cab, at least the monitor inside the cab, and we'll put it in there. The lights are really impressive. Really, really like them. Definitely going to have to replace the other two lights here in the near future. I'm currently searching for something that I can lay flat like that, a replacement. Most all replacements actually had the mount on the bottom, so it's extremely hard to find. I've looked up speaker lights and everything else. These are from Deere, the speaker lights. I think I had those earlier in a video, but you can see kind of how that bracket works in there. I think the brackets turned out really nice. No drilling was required. All of these bolt holes were there. Over on the other side, they were actually filled in with just plastic filler. Also, I think overall the wiring job itself is pretty clean. In fact, we cleaned up some of Deere's wiring mess, like I mentioned. A lot of the wires are stuffed in behind the caution light there, and evidently they had fallen out over time. But yeah, and then let's see here, and then I'll go ahead and get in the cab, and I'll show you the fuse box back here. So you can't probably see that very well. Let me get a flashlight. All right, so here is the fuse block and the relays. So to power the lights, we actually pulled off the accessory plug here on the left-hand side of the tractor. Very, very minimal amperage that we would need to pull off that. That's a 15 amp fuse going to the accessory plug. Everything was mostly done in either 12 or 14 gauge wire, except for the linear actuator, which was done in 10. You can see the relay down there. The relay everything is keyed power. So you have to turn the key on in order to get the power to the lights. So, which is always something you want. Other than that, the most challenging part was the relays for the linear actuator. The relays for the linear actuator, I am not an electrician, or I'm not very good at electrical stuff. I think if I were to try to do it myself, even with some of the preliminary design I had done, I would have certainly struggled quite a bit. With all that said, these seem like really cool additions and good additions, and I think they will be super useful. The lights are very easy to add. It just takes some time and some wiring. However, the linear actuator, I would say, unless you really understand DC power, I would probably stay away from trying to add the linear actuator. Basically, how we ran the linear actuator is up underneath here. I don't know if you can see it or not. Maybe you can. You see that red right there? That's the main power port. What we did is, in line with that, we hooked a 10 gauge wire. That's what we calculated we needed for the voltage drop. We needed a 10 gauge wire to get to the linear actuator. Because this linear actuator is under no stress, we actually would have needed, if we wanted the full 20 amps out of it, we would have needed a 6 gauge wire. But because we didn't have necessarily load on this, all it's doing is moving pins. Because we don't have the load on it, we were able to get away with 10 gauge. Something I was not planning on doing, but we got all the wires wrapped and everything and sheathing, and so that's nice. We left us some extra here. Everything is done in weather pack connectors. So the one disconnects there, and then actually, because like I've said in one of my future projects, I want to add a single point connection for hydraulics. There's the other weather pack connector right there. So when you take the loader off, it's pretty easy to disconnect the power to the linear actuator. So I'll actually shut up here, and we'll get a couple videos. What I'll do is I'll just set the camera up, and I'll get a couple videos of disconnecting and connecting with the linear actuator, and then we'll get out and drive the tractor around, and I'll show you the lights.